My own mother set up my husband with his ex and thought I would just accept it. I always believed that betrayal was something that happened to other people, not me. I was married to Ethan for 5 years, built a life with him, and trusted him with everything. But trust, as I learned, can be a fragile thing. And sometimes, the person holding the hammer isn't the one you expect. It all started at my mother's annual charity gala. It was supposed to be just another night of networking, fundraising, and listening to my mother, Evelyn, bask in the glory of her perfectly curated social circle. But as I stood by the bar, sipping champagne, I saw something that made my stomach twist. My mother and Ethan, deep in conversation, their heads close together like co-conspirators. Her hand rested lightly on his arm, her eyes gleaming with something I could not quite place. I tried to brush it off. My mother had always liked Ethan, maybe a little too much. But she had also been the kind of woman who believed she knew what was best for everyone, including me, and she had never been shy about voicing her opinions, especially when it came to my marriage. Then my best friend, Mia, appeared beside me, her eyes locked on them. "They've been awfully cozy lately," she murmured, sipping her drink. I forced a smile. "Mom has always adored Ethan." "Yeah," Mia said, still watching them. "But have you noticed how often she's been mentioning Veronica?" Veronica, Ethan's college sweetheart, the one who got away. My mother had brought her up so many times in recent weeks that I had started counting. "Oh, did you hear Veronica moved back to the city?" I ran into Veronica at the gallery. "She looks amazing. Veronica is single now. Isn't that interesting?" I swallowed hard. "She wouldn't." Mia turned to face me, her expression unreadable. "Wouldn't she?" That night, I confronted Ethan. We were barely through the front door when I turned to him. My arms crossed. "What is going on with you and my mother?" He looked startled. "What? Nothing." "Then why is she suddenly acting like Veronica is the greatest thing to ever walk this earth? And why are you avoiding my eyes right now?" Ethan ran a hand through his hair, a nervous habit. "Angela, it's not what you think." I took a step closer, my heart pounding. "Then tell me what I should think." He hesitated just long enough for my stomach to drop. "She just thinks, maybe we rushed into marriage." He admitted that maybe we should have explored other options. I finished for him, my voice cold. His silence was all the answer I needed. I felt something inside me crack. I had spent years trusting these two people, my husband and my mother. And yet, here they were, deciding my future without me. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. "Have you seen her, Veronica?" Ethan exhaled, looking away. That was answer enough. I nodded slowly. "Then get out." I stood in the middle of the kitchen, gripping the edge of the counter to keep myself steady. The silence after Ethan walked out felt suffocating, as if the air had been sucked out of the room. I had thrown him out, but the weight of what just happened was only beginning to sink in. I wasn't just dealing with a cheating husband, I was dealing with my own mother. The person who was supposed to love and protect me, orchestrating the whole thing. That betrayal stung more than anything. Mia arrived not long after. She had called as soon as I texted her. And she didn't waste time knocking, just walked in like she always did. Armed with a bottle of red wine and a look that said she was ready to fight someone. "He's an idiot," she said, pouring me a glass without asking. "And your mother?" I don't even have words for that level of insanity. I took the glass and swallowed a large sip, feeling the warmth spread through my chest. "I don't even know what to do next." "You don't have to do anything right now," Mia said, "except breathe, and maybe block your mother's number." I let out a humorless laugh. "Already did." She nodded approvingly, then sat across from me at the kitchen island. "So what's the plan? You kicking him out for good?" I exhaled slowly. "I don't know. He said he'd stay in a hotel tonight. I told him to leave. But," I trailed off, rubbing my temples, "I don't know if I was ready for him to actually go." Mia studied me for a moment. "Angela, be honest with yourself. If your mother hadn't been involved, would this hurt as much?" I thought about it. Ethan had betrayed me, but my mother had set the stage. She had been whispering in his ear, manipulating him, feeding him ideas about his what-ifs with Veronica. Maybe he had always been weak enough to fall for it, but she had made sure he did. "No," I admitted. "She made this worse." Mia sighed. Then you need to figure out what you're fighting for. Do you want to fix things with him? Or are you done? I stared at my wine glass. The deep red swirling inside. I don't know. And that was the truth. I didn't know if Ethan and I were beyond saving. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to let my mother decide for me. If she thought she could push me out of my own marriage and rewrite my life the way she wanted, she was about to learn just how wrong she was. The next morning, I woke up feeling like I had barely slept. My mind had been racing all night, replaying every word, every look, every betrayal. Ethan was gone. My mother was blocked. And yet, somehow, I felt no relief. Just an empty space where my life used to feel stable. I dragged myself into the kitchen, still in my robe, and found Mia already there, making coffee. She must have crashed on the couch after I fell asleep. She glanced at me over her shoulder. "You look like hell." "Thanks," I muttered, rubbing my face. "I feel worse." Mia handed me a cup and leaned against the counter. "So, did he call? Text?" I picked up my phone from the table. No messages from Ethan. No apologies. No explanations. Nothing from my mother, either. Not that I expected her to actually try. "Nothing," I said, "and I'm not reaching out first." Mia nodded, sipping her coffee. "Good. He should be the one crawling back if he even dares to think he still has a shot." I sighed and sat down. The thing is, I don't know if I even want to hear whatever excuse he's going to give. I should be furious. I am furious, but I also feel, I don't know, empty. "That's betrayal for you," Mia said. "It rips everything out of you. And then you're just left standing there, wondering if anything was ever real in the first place." I looked at her, surprised. I had never heard Mia sound so personal about something like this. "You've been through this before." It wasn't a question. Mia set her cup down. "Not exactly like this, but yeah, I've had people I trusted turn on me. And you know what I learned?" "What?" "That nothing hurts more than realizing someone you love was capable of hurting you on purpose." That hit me hard, because it wasn't just Ethan's actions that hurt, it was the fact that he had chosen this. He had listened to my mother's lies. He had walked into that situation willingly. And worst of all, my mother, the woman who raised me, had made it happen. I tightened my grip on my coffee mug. I need to do something. Sitting here feeling like this. It's not me. I don't care if Ethan wants to explain himself. I don't care if my mother thinks she won. I'm not going to sit here and let them shape the story of my life while I watch from the sidelines. Mia grinned. "Now that's the Angela I know. What's the plan?" I thought for a second, then met her gaze. "I need to focus on something bigger than them. Something for me." Mia raised an eyebrow. "Like what?" I didn't have an answer yet. But I knew one thing. Whatever it was going to be mine. My success. My life. My future. No one else's. The idea started forming in my mind almost immediately after my conversation with Mia. If there was one thing I had always wanted but never pursued fully, it was building something of my own. I had spent years working in corporate finance, playing by the rules, always doing what was expected of me. But now, I wanted to break free from those expectations. I wanted to create something that was mine and mine alone. Later that afternoon, Mia and I sat in my living room, laptops open, brainstorming ideas. She had seen the fire in my eyes earlier and knew I was serious. "So, let's go over your options," she said, typing furiously on her keyboard. "You've got experience in business, finance, and investments. You could start a consulting firm. Maybe something in real estate? Or," she stopped, glancing at me, "you already have something in mind, don't you?" I hesitated. "I do." Mia leaned in. "Spill." I took a deep breath. "I want to create something that actually helps people. Not just another financial firm. I want to build a business that makes a real impact. Something meaningful." Mia nodded, intrigued. "Like what?" I hesitated, then said, "Affordable housing." Her eyes widened. "Wait, like sustainable housing projects? Community-focused development?" I nodded. "Exactly. The city is full of overpriced developments that push people out. What if we built something better? Not just housing, but entire communities designed for people. Not just profit?" Mia whistled. "That's ambitious." "I know," I said, feeling the adrenaline rush through me. But I don't just want to prove them wrong. I want to do something that actually matters. My mother and Ethan? They think they've torn me down. They think I'll wallow in self-pity. But I'm going to build something so big, so impactful, that they'll have no choice but to see me rise. Mia grinned. I like where this is going. And you know what? I think you can actually pull it off. I smiled. But inside, I was already planning my next moves. I needed investors, a development plan, a team of people who could bring this vision to life. But first, I needed to put myself out there. I opened my laptop and pulled up my professional network. I had connections, people who respected my work. It was time to call in every favor, use every resource I had, and push forward. Mia watched me with amusement. You're already working, aren't you? I smirked. Of course, there's no time to waste. She raised her glass. To new beginnings. I clinked my glass against hers. To proving them all wrong. As I typed out my first emails to potential contacts, I felt something I hadn't in a long time, excitement. This wasn't about revenge anymore. This was about me taking control of my own life. And nothing, not my mother, not Ethan, no one was going to stop me. The next few days were a blur of emails, phone calls, and late-night planning sessions. Mia and I worked tirelessly, mapping out our vision for the affordable housing project. Every time exhaustion started creeping in, I reminded myself why I was doing this, why I had to see this through. My mother and Ethan had built their lives around manipulation and control. But I was going to build something real, something lasting. By the end of the week, we had our first major breakthrough. One of my former colleagues, Daniel, who now worked in urban development, responded to my email with genuine enthusiasm. This is a brilliant idea. He wrote, if you can put together a solid proposal, I can introduce you to some investors who might be interested. That was all I needed to hear. I immediately got to work drafting the proposal, pulling in every bit of knowledge and experience I had gained over the years. I knew I had one shot at this, one chance to prove I wasn't just another person crushed under betrayal. Mia watched as I fine-tuned the numbers, adjusting projections and refining my pitch. You know, she said, leaning against the kitchen counter with her coffee. I've never seen you like this before. Like what? I asked without looking up from my laptop. Determined, focused, relentless. She tilted her head. It's like you were waiting for something to push you to this point. I let out a dry chuckle. Maybe I was. She studied me for a moment before speaking again. Do you think your mother has any idea what she's done? I finally looked up. No, and that's the best part. Mia smirked. So, what's next? Next, I leaned back in my chair. We pitch this to investors. We get funding. We find the right people to make it happen. And then, I exhaled, feeling the weight of my ambitions settle on my shoulders. We build something they can never take away from me. A week later, I stood outside a glass office building, gripping my presentation folder in one hand and my phone in the other. Daniel had set up a meeting with a group of potential investors. And this was my chance to secure the backing we needed. Mia squeezed my arm. You've got this. I nodded, adjusting my blazer. Yeah, I do. Walking into that room, I felt the weight of everything that had led me here. The betrayal, the heartbreak, the anger, all of it had fueled this moment. And as I stood in front of the investors, speaking with conviction about the vision for our project, I saw something in their eyes, respect. By the time I finished, the room was silent. Then, one of the investors, a man named Mr. Lawson, leaned forward. This is ambitious, he said, but it's smart. I like smart. That was the moment I knew I was going to make this happen. Not just for me, but to prove to everyone who had doubted me that I wasn't someone they could break. I was just getting started. The meeting with the investors was a turning point. But it was only the beginning. Mr. Lawson and his associates were interested. But they wanted more details, more projections, more proof that I could turn this vision into reality. That meant long nights, early mornings, and endless revisions to our business plan. Mia and I worked relentlessly, turning my dream into something investors couldn't ignore. She handled PR, networking, and media outreach, while I focused on the logistics, securing permits, finalizing architectural plans, and assembling the right team. Every time doubt crept in, I reminded myself of what was at stake. This wasn't just about proving myself anymore. It was about building something that mattered. Then the unexpected happened. I was in the middle of a call with a city planner when I got a message from an unknown number. At first, I ignored it, but then another message followed. "We need to talk. It's about Ethan." I frowned. The only people who would send me a message like that were from my past, the past I had walked away from. Against my better judgment, I called the number back. A woman answered on the second ring. "Is this Olivia?" My breath caught. I recognized that voice instantly. Clara. My mother's friend. She was one of those women who had always been in the background of my childhood. The type who thrived on gossip and whispered secrets over wine. If she was reaching out to me, it wasn't for something small. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice colder than I intended. She hesitated, then sighed. "Look, I know you don't want anything to do with your mother. But I thought you should know. Ethan is in trouble." I closed my eyes, gripping the phone tighter. Of course, he was. My mother had spent years building him up, protecting him, covering for his mistakes. Now, it seemed, something had caught up with him. But why was she telling me? "I don't care," I said firmly. "Whatever mess he's made, it's not my problem. That's just it," Clara said, lowering her voice. "Your mother is trying to make it your problem. She's been telling people that you owe the family. That now that you're successful, you should be stepping in to fix things." I laughed, but there was no humor in it. Of course, she was. It was so typical of her, to abandon me when I needed her. But now that I had built something for myself, suddenly I was supposed to be family again. "What exactly does she want from me?" I asked. "Money," Clara admitted. "Ethan's business is failing. Your mother put a lot of her savings into helping him. And now she's losing everything. She's desperate." I let that sink in. For years, she had made me feel like I was nothing compared to Ethan. Now, suddenly, I was supposed to be their savior? "Let me guess," I said. "She expects me to bail them out?" Clara sighed. "She thinks if she can get you to a family meeting, she can convince you." I shook my head. Not happening. For the first time in my life, I had the power, and I wasn't going to waste it saving people who had never once saved me. The more I thought about Clara's call, the angrier I became. My mother had spent years making me feel like I was worthless, pushing me aside in favor of Ethan. Yet now that he was failing, she had the audacity to think I owed them something? I put my phone down and took a deep breath. Mia, sitting across from me, noticed my expression shift. "What happened?" she asked, concern in her voice. I debated brushing it off. But Mia had been with me through everything, through the late nights, the sacrifices, the struggle of building this company from nothing. If anyone deserved to know, it was her. "My mother," I muttered. "Or rather, her friend. She called to tell me Ethan is in trouble. And now my mother wants me to fix it." Mia scoffed. "Let me guess, she ignored you when you needed her. But now that you have something she wants, suddenly she's reaching out?" "Exactly." I shook my head. "Ethan ran his business into the ground. And she funneled her savings into him. Now they're both drowning. And she thinks I'll be the lifeline." Mia leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "Are you even considering it?" That question hit me hard. Because for 1 second, just 1 second, a tiny part of me had hesitated. Not because I cared about saving them, but because a part of me still wanted them to regret how they treated me. I wanted them to see what I had become. I wanted them to feel the weight of their mistakes. But that was their problem, not mine. "No," I said finally. "I don't owe them anything." Mia nodded, satisfied. "Good, but I don't think they'll stop here." I exhaled sharply. "I know, and that's what worries me." Then came the second call. The next morning, my phone rang again. This time, it wasn't Clara, it was my mother. I stared at the screen, my fingers hovering over the decline button. But something inside me told me to pick up. I wanted to hear what she had to say. I answered, "What do you want?" There was a brief pause. Then a sigh. "Olivia, sweetheart, it's been so long." I clenched my jaw. She had no right to call me sweetheart. Not after everything. "Get to the point," I said coldly. She hesitated, then sighed again. "It's Ethan. He needs help. I know we've had our differences, but we're still family." I laughed bitterly. "Family? You cut me out of your life for 20 years. You blocked my calls. You told people I wasn't part of the family anymore. And now, suddenly, I'm your daughter again? She had the nerve to sound hurt. It wasn't like that. It was exactly like that. I snapped. You threw me away like I didn't exist. Now that you need something. You remember I exist. There was silence. I could practically hear her trying to come up with an excuse. But there was nothing she could say that would change what had happened. I thought you'd want to help your brother. She finally said, her voice softer. No, I said firmly. Ethan is your son, not my responsibility. She let out a frustrated breath. Olivia, I don't want to fight. Then stop calling. I interrupted, because nothing you say will change my answer. And for the first time in my life, I hung up on her. For the first time in my life, I hung up on my mother. And for the first time in 20 years, I didn't feel guilty about it. But I knew this wasn't the end. She wouldn't give up that easily. I spent the rest of the day trying to push it out of my mind. But the frustration lingered like an unwanted guest. Why now? Why did she suddenly think she could waltz back into my life after all these years? After all the ways she had shut me out? That night, I sat on my balcony with a glass of wine, watching the city lights twinkle below. I had built a life here, far from the suffocating control of my mother and the shadow of Ethan. I was successful on my own. I had fought for every opportunity. And I had won. And now, she wanted a piece of it. I took a sip of my wine just as my phone buzzed again. I let out a sigh, already knowing who it was before I even checked the screen. Ethan. I let the phone ring, debating whether to answer. After what happened with my mother, I had no interest in hearing whatever excuse or sob story he had prepared. But something told me I needed to hear what he had to say. I answered, Ethan. There was a long silence before he finally spoke. His voice was lower than I remembered, like he had been worn down. Hey, Liv. Hearing him call me by my childhood nickname made something in my chest tighten. But I would not let nostalgia cloud my judgment. What do you want? I asked flatly. He sighed. Mom told me she called you. Of course she did. She told me you wouldn't help. I scoffed. And what exactly did she expect? Did she expect me to forget everything? To pretend like the last 20 years didn't happen? Like you weren't the reason she threw me away? Ethan was silent. I pushed forward. Did you even care? Did you ever wonder what happened to me? Or were you too busy enjoying the fact that you were the golden child? His breath hitched. I didn't know. Liv, I didn't know she cut you out completely. Bullshit. My grip tightened around my glass. You knew exactly what was happening. And you let it happen. He hesitated. Look, I was a kid. I didn't understand. You were 16. Ethan, you understood enough. Silence. I could hear the faint sound of traffic on his end. Then, finally, he spoke again. You're right, he admitted. I did nothing. I let Mom push you out because it was easier for me. And I'm sorry for that. I really am. I wasn't sure what to say to that. I had expected excuses, guilt trips, or more lies. But an apology? I hadn't been prepared for that. Before I could respond, he continued, I didn't call to ask for money. That surprised me. Then why did you call? Another pause. Then he said, because I wanted to know if there's any chance you'd ever forgive me. I didn't know how to respond. Forgiveness? That word felt foreign, especially coming from him. I let out a slow breath, trying to process what Ethan had just said. He wanted to know if I could forgive him? After 20 years? After standing by while our mother erased me from our family like I never existed? I stared out over the city skyline, my fingers gripping the stem of my wine glass. Could I forgive him? You can't just ask that. I finally said, you can't disappear from my life for 2 decades. Let Mom rewrite history, and then show up expecting me to just let it all go. I know, he said quietly. I don't expect you to. Then why even ask? Ethan sighed. Because I don't want Mom's version of things to be the only truth that exists. And I don't want it to be the only thing between us. I swallowed hard. That was the problem, wasn't it? She had rewritten everything, twisting reality until she was the victim and I was the selfish one who abandoned the family. The idea of Mom's lies being the only version of the past that remained made me sick. But at the same time, how could I just let Ethan back in? Why now? I asked. Why? After all these years, are you suddenly reaching out? Because I was on TV? Because Mom told you to? No, his voice was firm. Because for the first time, I can see just how much damage she's done. And I hate that I let her do it. That caught me off guard. Ethan had always been the golden child. Her perfect son. The one she molded into everything she wanted. If he was finally admitting that she had hurt me, maybe, just maybe, there was a part of him that wasn't beyond saving. But that didn't mean I was ready to forgive him. I don't know what you want from me, Ethan, I said honestly. I don't either, he admitted. I just wanted to hear your voice. And to tell you I'm sorry. Even if that doesn't change anything. I exhaled, feeling a mix of emotions I wasn't ready to unpack. Part of me wanted to tell him to go to hell. That he had lost the right to talk to me years ago. But another part of me, the part that had once loved my brother, wasn't quite ready to say goodbye again. So instead of hanging up, I said, I need time. Ethan let out a breath, like he had been waiting for me to shut him down completely. Okay, I'm not saying I forgive you. I warned. I don't know if I ever will. I understand. There was a long pause. Then, quietly, he said, for what it's worth, I never stopped missing you. My throat tightened. I had no response to that. So I simply said, good night, Ethan, and ended the call. I sat in silence for a long time after hanging up. My phone was still in my hand. Screen dark, yet I couldn't bring myself to put it down. Ethan missed me. Those words echoed in my head, stirring emotions I wasn't ready to face. Part of me wanted to believe him, to hold on to the idea that my brother had finally seen the truth. But the years of silence, of watching him stand by while Mom erased me, were hard to ignore. I wasn't ready to trust him again. Still, something in his voice, the way he sounded almost desperate, made me hesitate before writing him off completely. I had spent the last 20 years learning to live without my family. Did I really want to reopen that wound? The next morning, I went to work like nothing had happened. I buried myself in meetings, overseeing the latest project expansion, pretending that Ethan's call hadn't rattled me. But even as I reviewed reports and answered emails, his words were there, sitting in the back of my mind like an uninvited guest. By lunch, I had convinced myself that ignoring it was the best option. I had a life now, a family of my own. I didn't need to go back. But then I got a text. Ethan, I know you need time. But if you're willing, I'd like to meet. Just us. No Mom, no one else. Just to talk. I stared at the message, debating whether to respond. Then, before I could second guess myself, I typed back. Me. 1 hour. Coffee shop on 5th. That's all I can promise. If Ethan really wanted to make amends, he would show up. When I arrived at the cafe, he was already there, sitting at a corner table, nursing a cup of coffee. He looked different from the last time I saw him, older. Obviously, but also tired. There were faint lines on his face, and his usual confidence had been replaced with something else. Regret, maybe. I hesitated before walking over. As soon as he saw me, he stood up. Hey. I sat down across from him, keeping my posture stiff, guarded. You wanted to talk. He nodded. Yeah, I don't know how to start. I raised an eyebrow. An apology usually works. Ethan let out a breath. You're right. He ran a hand through his hair, looking uncomfortable. I should have reached out sooner. I should have fought harder. I should have. But you didn't. My voice was firm. You let her do it. Ethan, you let her erase me. His face twisted. I know. Silence stretched between us. Finally, he said, I don't expect you to forgive me. But I want to fix this. I don't want Mom's version of things to be the only truth left. I watched him carefully. Was he really trying? Or was this just guilt eating away at him now that I had built a life without them? I didn't have an answer yet. But for the first time in years, I wasn't ready to walk away. Not yet. For the first time in 20 years, I wasn't ready to walk away. But that didn't mean I was ready to forgive. Ethan sat across from me, waiting, his fingers tapping against his coffee cup. He looked nervous, like he wasn't sure whether to say more or just let me process everything. I don't know if you can fix this, I finally said, keeping my voice steady. You stood by while she erased me. You let them all pretend I didn't exist. His eyes dropped to the table. I know. I expected him to argue, to make excuses like everyone else had. But he didn't. Instead, he exhaled, shaking his head. I was a coward. That caught me off guard. He met my gaze again. Something raw in his expression. I should have stood up for you. I should have fought for you. But I didn't. His jaw tightened, and I regret it every damn day. I leaned back in my chair, crossing my arms. Why now, Ethan? Why reach out after all these years? His throat bobbed as he swallowed. Because I saw your interview. He let out a dry laugh. Because I saw everything you built without us. And it made me realize how much I lost. I studied him carefully, looking for any sign of manipulation. Was this really about regret? Or was he only here now because my success had made me worth noticing again? I don't need your guilt, I said bluntly. I don't need your pity. It's not pity, he sighed, rubbing a hand over his face. He hesitated. I miss my sister. I clenched my jaw. Your sister? The one you abandoned? Ethan flinched. Yeah, he admitted. That one. I wanted to be angry. I wanted to shove all of his regrets back in his face and tell him it was too late. But the truth was, hearing him say it, hearing him admit it, did something I wasn't ready to deal with. A long silence stretched between us. Finally, I said, I don't know if I can ever forgive you. His shoulders tensed, but he nodded. I get that. But, I took a slow breath. Still unsure if I would regret this. I don't know if I'm ready to walk away either. Ethan's head snapped up, hope flickering in his eyes. This doesn't mean I trust you. I warned. It doesn't mean we're suddenly okay. I know, he said quickly, but maybe we could start over? I stared at him, my fingers tightening around my coffee cup. Maybe, I said, but I won't make it easy for you. Ethan let out a small, almost relieved laugh. I wouldn't expect anything less. For the first time since he sat down, the tension in my chest loosened, just a little. I wasn't ready to forgive. I wasn't ready to let him back in completely. But maybe, just maybe, I was ready to see where this went. The next few weeks were strange. Ethan and I weren't close, not yet. But we weren't strangers anymore either. At first, I kept my guard up, answering his messages with short responses, keeping our conversations surface level. I refused to let myself believe he had changed. People don't just change after 20 years of silence. But he kept showing up. Not in an overwhelming way. Not pushing too hard, but just enough to prove he was serious about trying. One afternoon, he sent me a picture. It was an old one, me at 13, sitting on our childhood front porch with him beside me, both of us grinning with ice cream cones in hand. I stared at it for a long time before responding. Where did you find this? Ethan replied almost immediately. Mom had it in an old album. That single message nearly unraveled me. Mom. I hadn't thought about her much since I cut ties with our family. And honestly, I had no desire to. The way she betrayed me. The way she let them all push me aside without so much as a fight. It wasn't something I could ever forget. But Ethan bringing her up made something shift in me. Not regret, not longing, just curiosity. I let the conversation drop after that. But the next time we met for coffee, Ethan hesitated before sitting down. I know you don't want to talk about her, he said carefully, but Mom's been asking about you. I clenched my jaw. And? She's different now, he continued, his voice quieter. I think she's been carrying more guilt than she lets on. I exhaled sharply, my patience thinning. Why are you telling me this, Ethan? He sighed, running a hand through his hair. Because I think you deserve to hear it. She knows she failed you. And she's not asking for forgiveness. Just the chance to see you again. I stared at him, waiting for the anger to come. But all I felt was exhaustion. You don't owe her anything. He added quickly. I just thought you should know. I picked at the sleeve of my coat. Heart pounding. Did I want to see her again? Did I want to open that door? I wasn't sure. Maybe some wounds were meant to stay closed. But as I sat there, staring at Ethan, I realized something. For the first time in 20 years. I had the power to decide. Not her, not our family, just me. And whether I walked through that door or not, that was something they could never take from me again. Life has a way of forcing us to confront the past, even when we think we have moved on. Healing doesn't always mean reconciliation. And forgiveness doesn't require letting people back into your life. It means taking control of your own story and deciding what you will allow to affect your peace. Sometimes, the best thing you can do for yourself is to walk away. Other times, confronting the past gives you the closure you never knew you needed. Whatever you choose, make sure it is for you, not for them. Your happiness should never be a compromise.